The screams echoed through the thin atmosphere of New Haven, a colonial world that had never known war. Children's voices mixed with their parents' desperate cries as the Cathal raiders descended from the crimson sky like metallic locusts, their ships spitting plasma death onto the defenseless settlement below. Commander Vextar of the Cathal hegemony watched the slaughter from his flagship's bridge with cold satisfaction. These human colonies were so predictably weak, no planetary defenses, no military installations, just soft civilians trying to scratch out a living on the frontier worlds. Perfect targets for what his people called harvesting runs. Secure the young ones for the slave markets, he barked to his subordinates. Execute the adults. Leave the structures intact, we can sell this world to the highest bidder once it's been cleaned. For 3 centuries, the Cathal had perfected this brutal business model. They identified isolated colonies, struck without warning, and harvested everything of value, including sentient beings for their thriving slave trade. The major galactic powers looked the other way, finding it convenient to have the Cathal eliminate problematic settlements that might interfere with their own expansion plans. Humanity's outer colonies had proven particularly profitable targets. Spread thin across hundreds of worlds, lacking a unified defense force, and stubbornly independent in a galaxy that rewarded conformity, human settlements were easy prey for organized predators. But as Vextar supervised the loading of terrified human captives into cargo holds, his communications officer suddenly straightened at his station. Commander, the junior officer's voice carried an unfamiliar note of concern. We're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts, closing fast. Vextar's mandibles clicked with annoyance. Local defense patrol? Impossible. Our intelligence confirmed this system was undefended. No sir, the officer's voice had risen to near panic. These signatures are unprecedented. I'm reading at least 50 vessels, all of them larger than our flagship. Sir, I think it's... The bridge's main viewscreen erupted with the most terrifying sight Vextar had ever witnessed. Emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation came Earth's first response fleet, humanity's answer to 3 centuries of unprotected colonies and unavenged massacres. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. Where most civilizations built their vessels for efficiency or elegance, these human warships were designed for a single purpose: overwhelming, merciless destruction. Each vessel was a kilometer-long monument to humanity's capacity for righteous fury, bristling with weapons that had never been tested against civilian targets because they had never needed to be. Admiral Elena Vasquez, commanding from the bridge of the UES Retribution, surveyed the scene below with eyes that had seen too many reports like this one. New Haven was the 37th human colony to be attacked by the Cathal in the past 5 years. The 37th community of farmers, teachers, children, and dreamers to be slaughtered for profit. It was also going to be the last. Fleet status report, she commanded, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. All ships report ready, Admiral, responded Captain James Morrison, her tactical coordinator. The Cathal have 43 vessels in system, mostly light raiders and transports. They're attempting to form a defensive formation around the planet. Vasquez almost smiled. Defensive formation. How quaint. She activated fleet-wide communications. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. Today we demonstrate why humans do not make good victims. Rules of engagement are simple: no quarter asked, none given. These creatures targeted our children. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth's family. The response that came back from 50 ship captains was not the professional acknowledgement typical of most military operations. This was something primal, something that had been building in humanity's collective consciousness every time they received news of another colony burned, another group of their people sold into slavery. For New Haven. The battle cry echoed across all channels as the human fleet engaged. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was an execution carried out with technological precision and emotional satisfaction that had been brewing for centuries. The Cathal ships, designed for striking helpless targets, found themselves facing weapons systems they couldn't comprehend. Human kinetic accelerators fired projectiles at a significant percentage of light speed, punching through alien shields like tissue paper. plasma cannons, reverse-engineered from a dozen different technologies and improved beyond their original specifications, turned enemy vessels into expanding clouds of superheated gas, but it was the humans' tactical approach that truly distinguished this engagement from conventional space combat. Where most species fought with careful efficiency, conserving resources and minimizing risks, Earth's fleet fought with the methodical thoroughness of exterminators dealing with vermin. Vextar watched in horror as his raiding fleet was systematically dismantled. His ships weren't just being destroyed, they were being hunted. Human vessels worked in coordinated groups, herding damaged Cathal ships away from escape routes before finishing them with almost casual precision. "Commander," his communications officer screamed, "the humans are hailing us." On screen, Admiral Vasquez appeared, her expression carrying the cold fury of someone who had seen the bodies of children in the settlement below. "Attention Cathal vessels. I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of Earth's First Response Fleet. You have committed acts of genocide against human civilians. Your species considers this business. We consider it war." Vextar found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than the commanding tone he intended. "This is Commander Vextar of the Hegemony. We demand safe passage. This system is not under Earth jurisdiction." Vasquez interrupted. This system was not under Earth jurisdiction. As of today, any system containing human life is considered Earth territory, and attacks against our colonies will be met with total retaliation. Your business model is terminated. Around Vextar, his bridge crew watched their tactical displays with growing despair. In less than 20 minutes, 42 of their 43 ships had been reduced to debris. Only his flagship remained, surrounded by human vessels like a wounded animal surrounded by predators. We surrender," Vextar gasped. "Under galactic conventions of warfare. You forfeited any claim to civilized treatment when you targeted non-combatants," Vasquez replied. "However, we're not animals like you. We're taking you alive for a very specific reason." 2 hours later, Vextar found himself in the cargo bay of the Retribution, along with the few dozen survivors from his fleet. The human captives his ships had taken were being treated by Earth medical teams, but the Cathal prisoners found themselves facing something unprecedented in their species' violent history: consequences. Admiral Vasquez stood before them, flanked by Marines whose body language suggested they would very much like permission to express their feelings about child killers in more direct terms. "You're going to carry a message back to your hegemony," she announced. "And to anyone else who thinks human colonies make attractive targets. Earth is no longer content to let our people die while we play politics with galactic powers who find our suffering convenient." She gestured toward the view screen, which showed the rebuilt settlement of New Haven and the massive orbital defense platforms that had been constructed in the past few hours. Earth's engineering capabilities, it seemed, were as impressive as their military technology. From today forward, any attack on human civilians will trigger a response like what you witnessed here. We will find you. We will hunt you. And we will end you. Her voice carried absolute conviction. We spent 3 centuries learning to build worlds. Now you're going to learn what happens when world builders decide to build weapons instead. The surviving Cathal were loaded onto a single ship, their own vessel, heavily damaged but spaceworthy, and sent home with their message. As they limped away from the system, Vextar looked back at the human fleet, which had already begun establishing permanent patrol routes through the outer colonies. 3 months later, the galactic community received reports that the entire Cathal hegemony had officially disbanded their raiding fleets and entered into agricultural pursuits. Similar career changes were reported among 17 other species that had built their economies on preying upon isolated settlements. Admiral Vasquez, promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of Earth's expanding colonial defense force, stood in her new headquarters on New Haven and looked out at the children playing in streets that should have been their graves. The settlements throughout human space were no longer isolated and helpless. They had learned, perhaps too late for some, that there was a difference between being peaceful and being defenseless. The galaxy's predators had spent centuries targeting the helpless, confident that no consequences would come. They had been wrong about humanity before. They wouldn't have the chance to be wrong again.